10 years ago, I was playing in a band called the Strata Cruisers, and at the time we were really strapped for cash. A friend suggested we go along and do some drug trials. So we went along, found out it was for glaucoma drops. The folks were like saying, God, they're messing with your eyes. What the hell are you doing? And anyway, we got about 600 quid for that, so I've managed to buy the guitar that I'd always wanted. Afterwards, we all went along to a cafe, and everyone's like looking at us because we've got this yellow dye all running down our faces, and they're like, what's going on here?
If we're going to accept that drugs are going to be part of modern medicine, then the drugs have to be tested. And as such, the first consumers of these drugs must be prepared to run a certain risk.
New drugs and medicines are developed to combat disease and ill health and to raise the quality of life for all. However, in the early 60s, the appalling potential of drug-induced disease was realised worldwide through the horrendous consequences of the morning sickness drug thalidomide. Committees to regulate the safety of new medicines are set up in the UK and around the world. Human testing is the final stage in the development necessary to bring a new drug from the test tube to the chemist's shop.
You might say that participants in trials sell themselves to science. They know what they're doing to a degree, and they know what they're going to be paid for it, and the decision is theirs.
I think drug trials are fine. When I was a student, we made a few bob, enabled us to go on holiday and things like that. And I knew exactly the state of my own health. I was having medical checkups every week, it was a good thing.
I've seen an advert in the Big Issue which offered loads of money to basically take part in these trials, but I haven't actually made the decision to do it yet or got any further with it, because everybody I speak to seems to just be putting me off all the time, just saying that you're mad to do it and you're taking these things, you don't know what they are or what they'll do to you.
I guess the main reason why I do it as well as many other people do it, especially a lot of travellers, is because it's really good money. I did a 36-day trial for £2,800, which got me around quite a bit.
I've been on the road for 2.5 years, so drug tests are really handy when you're travelling. You can just sort of pick up a bit of cash and then go off and spend it and come back and find another trial and off you go again.
Between us, we've taken part in about 15 trials over the past 6 years, and at various clinics you meet people who have done them at clinics all over the world, and through doing this we've drawn on our experiences and basically written a guide to taking part in these trials.
We set up a business to publish it. We advertise in national magazines. It's partly to provide an information service for people who are interested, and it allays people's myths about what it's like to take part as a volunteer.
Some trials most people I've met have really enjoyed doing it.
One of the first trials I did was a marijuana test where you actually had to play video games, pretend you were driving cars to see if it affected your ability. It was pretty good. You got all the food you could eat and all the video games you could do all day, and the object of the exercise is to sit there with a steering wheel and try and keep this little dot between two moving lines. If you hit the wall it made a little beep, but the trouble is after you smoke for a while you sort of forget the object of the exercise and you start playing tunes on the wall. It's sort of like beep 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 boom boom boom.
Yeah, I did a couple of drug trials about 10 years ago, and one of them involved keeping samples of my own feces. I had to keep them for about 6 weeks. This one time I was staying with my brothers, and I left the samples on the kitchen table. We went out. His girlfriend came in, thought I'd been making some chutney at the time, and she opened them up to have a bit of a sniff of, Anyway, you should have seen the look on her face when she realised what it was.
The guy who was sharing the room with me is a Colombian guy who didn't speak much English at all. And so I had to try and explain to him that he'd just put his name down for a 2-week suppository test.
There was a trial in an adjacent ward in London that they were doing electrodes strapped to people's heads to test some kind of reaction with the eyes. And it was quite weird because these guys were walking around with huge skull caps and computer link-ups hanging around the back of their head, so they'd plug them into a computer every couple of hours to test their reactions, which was quite strange, I guess.
I heard about this one guy, and the trial he was actually in was for antidepressants.
They had us wired up these electrodes to our heads, and we also had a gauge to our penis which measured the frequency of our erections. Apparently we were having loads more than normal.
Screening volunteers for suitability usually includes blood and urine tests to exclude the possibility of disease or the consumption of illegal drugs or alcohol.
This one chap came into the ward one day and he'd like had 16 units of alcohol the night before, and they didn't pick that up.
A lot of lads used to, obviously, you know, have smoke a little bit of dope now and again. But the problem is that they could tell 3 weeks afterwards if you just did one drag of a joint, you know. So a lot of people did get booted off for taking drugs.
This guy came up to me the other day. The nurse obviously wanted to test him for some other drugs or something, asked him for a urine sample, and he just came up to me and asked me to do one for him. And I just said sorry, and I said I'm not going to do it.
I went for one in Germany, but unfortunately they rejected me because I was a vegetarian. So I learned from that. About 6 months later I tried to go back again, and I thought this time I won't tell them I'm a vegetarian, but this time they rejected me because I was allergic to dust. Next time I go back I know what to say.
It may be an idea to perhaps establish a register for participants in trials to avoid the possibility of people jumping from one trial to another onto the next, not only because of the contamination and the distortion it might provide in the results of trials, but for their own health as well.
Whenever you go for a study at a clinic, you're always going to meet some person whose best mate's brother's cousin has just been on a study and had the heart stopped or the toes chopped off. Complete rubbish.
Well, my girlfriend and I left college a couple of years ago and had this idea that we wanted to set up a cafe bar bookshop, but we had no money at the time and we didn't want to have to work for anyone else. And we heard about drug research trials, so we both went and did a flu trial. That was fine. Then I went and did a trial for antidepressants. But when I came out of hospital a couple of weeks later, I felt a bit kind of spaced out and didn't really feel that I fitted back in, and really just kind of out of sync with the way things were going.
The last trial I did, there was a guy on the ward whose whole side of his body blew up like a balloon, basically reacted to the drug pretty badly.
Today, I mean, I had a nurse, she sort of injected me there, but I think she missed the vein because nothing was coming out. And she was like just digging around trying to find the vein, and it was just so sore.
If you can catch it, I've got a few scars from one trial on this one, and my current bruise from the last couple of blood samples on the other one.
And so she went over to this arm and she was digging around in there as well. But this one's like still quite a bit sore now. But I mean, that's like the worst. The worst you come out with is maybe slight bruising. You look like a drug addict for a while, and that's it.
The one trial that I did when I got the injection every morning for anti-leukemia, and they took a corkscrew sort of looking needle. They ended up taking bone marrow out of hip bone, and I was actually told that it was the same as giving blood. It looked the same, and it was the same amount of pain, but it was actually 10 times worse than giving the blood. Every time I went for nurse and asked for some kind of treatment, I'd expected them to give me less of the, but they would just give me more and more paracetamols.
Organisers of clinical trials like to insist that participants wait a 3-month period between finishing one trial and starting another. This is referred to as a washout period because they want the effects of the medication in the first trial not to be carried over into the next trial and perhaps to contaminate it.
Because I've just got my local GP, one of the hospitals found out they had done a trial with another hospital under the 3-month gap. That hospital told a few other hospitals, and unfortunately I got blacklisted from a couple of them. The difference with Aussies and New Zealanders, a lot of the travellers come to England, they sign on with a local GP, which means they've got a clean medical record, do a drugs trial, get enough money to go to another country under the required limit of 3 months.
Every pharmacologically active medicine has the potential to cause side effects.
Well, I'm not worried about side effects because, as far as I'm concerned, that's part of the occupational hazards and why you get paid.
As far as long-term side effects go, when you go for a screening, you actually have all the risks explained, and you sign insurance documents with the doctor present. They're not disclaimers, they don't list
It's the opposite to a disclaimer.
Yeah, it's the opposite to a disclaimer. If you can prove anything down the line was as a result of your trial, then they'll pay compensation decided by an English court of law.
Which you get for similar injuries.
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem. You'd have to prove it was due to the experiment you took part on, but generally, due to the risks, it's not an issue. You don't really consider that when you take part.
Yeah.
In the short term, any risks that they might run, they would be compensated for. But the long-term risks, they don't really know. It might be difficult 15 or 20 years later to establish that a particular ill effect was caused by a trial 20 or 15 years earlier, and they might have a legal battle on their hands.
I know that I'll be compensated should I have any ill effects on the drug trial itself, but I'm not quite sure what would happen in the long term. Where would I stand legally? Makes you start to think. I don't actually want to think about it.
Taking a medicine, and particularly a new medicine, is a balance of risks and benefits. And the objective of clinical research is to ensure that the risk-benefit ratio of any new medicine is firmly on the side of therapeutic benefit, outweighing potential risks. In my opinion, clinical studies are today very well controlled and safe for all those who participate.
The only thing is, like, so many people have got bad feelings about it. Like my mum, she would freak out if she knew I was doing it.
I'd recommend it if you're strapped for cash, because it's quite an easy way to earn a large amount of cash in a very short amount of time. It's good. It depends how desperate you are, really, I guess. Yeah.
Although medical trials are as safe as they can be, I think I would be a little unhappy if one of my sons were to undergo one of these trials, largely because I think the potential risks in the long term are actually unknown.
Initially, when we started taking part in trials, we did it to relieve our debts because we were students, but now basically we spend the money on things we enjoy.
Yeah, I like to surf and skate. At the moment we're well into snowboarding. Big problem for most people. It isn't for everybody. They've got to abstain from social drugs and stuff. Our biggest problem's abstaining from alcohol 48 hours before the medical.